Welcome back, everyone, to We Heart Therapy. You're watching Your Guide to Therapy and Coaching, and I'm your host, Annabelle Bugatti. And today we're talking about grief, death, and dying. And we have a very special segment today. We have a special guest, Denise Love, who is actually an end-of-life doula. They're also sometimes called death doulas. And this is such a fascinating topic and one that is relatively new in America, but it's not so foreign to the rest of the world. And so Denise is here today to talk to us about what an end-of-life doula does. And so thank you, Denise, for being with us today.
It's a pleasure. Delighted to be here. Thank you for having me.
All right, Denise. So can you talk to our viewers a little bit about what an end-of-life/death doula is and what they do?
Okay, so an end-of-life death doula is somebody who kind of gets death. They're not scared of it. Most people say that even as a child, they were sort of interested in death, but it's either people who have had a brush with death themselves or have cared for somebody else or just have that empathy and compassion and want to sit beside people and kind of hold that space around them while they make decisions towards the end of life.
Yeah, so end-of-life doulas help people sort of deal with the business of the end-of-life business of dying and process.
I kind of think of us as a stage manager. You know, we come in, we assess the situation, we look at it, we can negotiate with relatives and friends, we can encourage the person to really live their life until they die. You know, so often when you get somebody tells you that you've got a terminal illness, it's kind of like it's the end. Well, let's start living. Let's really make this happen. Let's enjoy life. So we enhance people's experiences, but also very much for me, it's about helping them to move past the grief really quickly, meaning that, come on, let's think about the end of life and now think about what we've got left. So it's my understanding that when we work with people, the grieving process is often a lot less painful for those left, and people could face their own death without so much fear.
Yeah, and it sounds like people tend to be very aversive to speaking about death, especially their own death or the death of a loved one. And it sounds like death doulas sort of help them get a language.
Absolutely. So, you know, by doing the training course, we first of all look at how you feel about death, and that in itself, by clearing up our own thoughts and feelings around it, open the door to us to be able to hear other people's thoughts and feelings. So it's very much about language clearing, supporting, giving opportunities and options, you know, making suggestions, clarifying things, building in ways to deal with this. So it's just part of life, but we're so adverse. And so the transition is such a normal thing. Everybody that's born is born to die, and yet we choose to not even think about it.
Yeah, it can be so scary for so many people. Now, it sounds like an end-of-life doula helps manage the business end of dying, you know, like are your, last will and testament together.
All of that stuff.
Write off all of your affairs, helping the family decide on burial and all that kind of stuff. But does an end-of-life doula, are you also there during the death process?
So the services we provide it could be a 1-hour chat where we do your end-of-life wishes, we do all of that stuff, funeral planning, or it could be an hour a day. We come in and support the family. A role that I seem to play often is coming in for a time between 4 in the afternoon and 10 at night, particularly if it's in somebody's home, to allow the family to have a normal evening and to sit around the dinner table and talk and reflect and be. And it seems that if I sit with somebody when they're dying at that time, it normalises life for the family and gives the dying person energy away from the family, because often when somebody's dying, there's just too many people around, you know. So I can often there's either nobody or everybody. It seems to go like that. So often I come in and spend that time. I sleep overnight sometimes. I just find people sleep better if I stay in the room with a person. And I can even drift off to sleep. As long as I'm there, they know they can sleep well. I take people on outings. I had one beautiful woman wanted to eat chocolate cake every day, so we found a way to get her to a local restaurant. She hardly ever ate the chocolate cake, but that was something she needed to do. So I just fulfill wishes in a way. It's kind of like I think of myself as that stage manager who hears the families and friends' needs, hear the dying person's needs, and really gives that opportunity for that dying person to be heard, and then come up with solutions. And very much about green funerals as well, giving people an understanding of what they don't have to do as much as what they do have to do.
Right. And will you actually be there with the dying person as they take their last breath?
Very often, and very often out in the other room, and very often just in the house facilitating. But my dream often, and still works this way for me, is that if I have given the family the skills, often I don't need to be there. So
Right.
I'm there if they choose and want. So they might call me and say, oh, things have changed. Do you want to come? And I'll say, well, do you want me to come? And often just by reassuring them over the phone and saying, my dream is that they do it. But of course, if they choose and wish for me to be there, I'm there. But it's not my role often to be actually with the dying person. I'll be sitting quietly in a chair in the corner, or I might be out in the lounge room hearing each person's story, looking at photo albums while people go in and sit quietly, you know. So I'm often there just managing the stage again, saying, come on, guys, let's go out to the lounge room, let one person be here, or maybe this wonderful person needs some time just to die without us all watching them. So it's allowing, it's a very allowing role and a very motivating role to not have to be there. It is sort of this modern day theory, and there's almost a competition in families of, oh, I was holding their hand and I was there. And I say, guys, that's not the prize. The prize is giving them the space to die, you know.
Yeah. Yeah. So what is something that people need to be aware of as, let's say they have a family member, a loved one who is very close to death, and maybe they're sort of unsure of what to expect. Can you give us a brief snapshot of what the actual process is like when they start to take their last breaths?
Sure. So traditionally, most people get pneumonia before they die, particularly most people we look after tend to be cancer patients because it's a bit of a slow, prolonged death. Even if it's only a few days, it's still different to just a heart attack or something, you know, but so they tend to be the people we look after. So there's often a restlessness just you know, towards the last few days. And then as people are getting pneumonia, they often get very loud and rattly breathing, which can be really disconcerting for family members. And often that's when they think they should go to hospital. And what I want to say to families all the time, that's perfection. That's what we need. We need this body to allow itself to die. So that's often when I'll go and spend a day with the family, helping them to get their head around the noises that are happening. So it's quite loud and rattly and uncomfortable. And then it goes into a quite silent breathing where there's just a breath and then there's a long wait. And the thing that happens there mostly is people come to the room to wait for the last breath. And they tend to hover, you know, staring at the person. And then usually, and in most times, just before that, before the person dies, there's an awakening. People kind of rouse their head, or they might even open their eyes and speak, even if they've been unconscious. And that's a bit, people think, oh, they're recovering. But that's that moment of connection that's so precious and so real. And then they'll just go into a quiet space, and then that last breath will come. There's nothing dramatic about it. It's not like a lot of the movies. It's just a gentle releasing and letting go. So we go from very noisy breathing usually to gentle, quite slow, scary breathing because it's one breath and then a long break and one less. And that usually lasts for, 4 hours to a day. And then it happens. And so that's a time not to fuss with too much washing or worrying about turning them over, just sitting with them gently, not touching their body too much because they're fairly hypersensitive, and just one person at a time being, I find there's skin surfaces for people who are more awake. Their skin surface is a bit sensitive, so it's nice to go in and touch them, speak to them and say you're there, and just sit quietly beside them, sorry. And that's a time I often say to people, bring your photo albums in. We're not going to have albums anymore because of phones, but sit and look at photos, have your memories, and transmit some beautiful energy to the person of peacefulness and memories. And even if you don't like the person particularly, let's face it, we don't all love our relatives. And if you choose to be there, just be there in an energetic space of, I release you, I let you go. But you don't have to speak so much. You don't have to speak to them, but just give them a reminder that you'll be fine. And they drift off. But sometimes people want to be alone. Sometimes people wait till everybody leaves the room and then they die. And that's fine. Nobody has to be there. If that's what somebody chooses, it means it was perfect. They weren't lonely or sad.
Mm-hmm.
Does that help?
Yeah, that's so fascinating, and I think that's so important because again, so many people are so afraid of death and their own death and the death of loved ones. So knowing what's involved in the process, I think, can provide people with a sense of preparation and maybe peace about it.
There's usually a beautiful gentleness. It's very unusual in the last phase of anybody's distress. The distress might come a day or two before if they've got a lot of pain that can't be managed, and that does happen. But fortunately for me, I've never been with anybody, I don't think, that's been not been just really at ease, aside from this rattly breathing, which is disconcerting for other people, but the person doesn't seem to be in distress. So it's peaceful and beautiful, and that last breath just comes, and it's just this inertia. And sometimes, you know, the inertia of somebody lying there gently and their face slowly becomes pale. You can feel that the person's still saying goodbye and still in that state. And sometimes you think, oh, they're gone. It's a really interesting transition sometimes, you know, depending on what your spiritual beliefs are, I don't know. But for me, it's a really quiet time. Just be with them. Let them transition. Let them do whatever they're doing, you know, gently and calmly with just people holding the space around them.
Yeah. So, are end-of-life doulas, are they licensed? Are they therapists? Are they regular people who get specialized training? What's involved in that?
So the joyful thing is it's all just generalized people. We've got lots of therapists, and I've got lots of nurses. I've got lots of palliative care nurses who are choosing to transition from the medical side to the more spiritual and physical side. But they're just people in life who know that death matters, and they know that grief is how you feel about what happened, not what happened. So that I just love training people because I get everybody from accountants to lawyers, all sorts of different people come. And I call it the professionalization of humanhood. You know, we get to a point in life, and I've got people as young as 12 and 14 training. Wow. And it's all about just getting life. They're people who seem to have a knowledge base deep inside, maybe they were born with it, of just knowing that death is okay. So we don't have a licensing. Look, it's early days, and no doubt somewhere along the line somebody will want to license us. But for me, we're independent. I call us a practitioner or a consultant. We just come with all our background and life skill, and we say, I'll sit beside you and listen, and I'll hear you. And out of all the amazing tools that we bring with us, no matter how old you are, you kind of say, I'll help you here. And the joyful thing is also, too, we've often got, you know, if I've got somebody who's deeply Christian, I can suggest a Christian doula come in. If I've got somebody who's Buddhist, I can find a practicing Buddhist practitioner, or I can usually find somebody who meets the emotional and physical needs of that family really beautifully, if it's not me. So we all try and do 3 deaths a year so that there's always somebody can have somebody beside them. And being of service without taking anything in exchange is very different to being of service when you do take something. So that's part of our ongoing training. But no, we're just people doing a job that families used to do. Mm-hmm. And because of disconnect in life now, we don't have that.
Yeah. So it sounds like people from all walks of life can get trained as an end-of-life doula. There's no prerequisite or licensing requirements, but if somebody is interested in getting trained as an end-of-life doula, can you talk to them about the training process?
Sure. So there is bodies in other countries now, but I started 5 years ago. It's because of I just want to get people up and running. I'm just doing a 2-day introductory course, which is a simple course of looking at our own beliefs and thoughts around death. So once we've stepped through that and cleared out any of our own beliefs and thoughts and feelings, then there's 2-day ongoing courses that are practical training skills, when a baby dies skills. So I'm just building on that course training now. So people tend to step through the process of 3 courses so far. And my dream for next year is there'll be around 6 courses that are there just 2 days, intensive. Ideally, I would love to be doing once a week, but just to cover the country, it's such a big country. I just want to get people out there holding the space that are willing to get a little bit wrong if they're not perfect. But, fortunately, because people come with a background of other skills, they tend to be fairly comfortable in life, they're comfortable in their own skin, they have other tools on board already. So doula training for me is 2 days with 3 ongoing courses, and then you're ready to go and start meeting people if you choose. Something that's interesting, Annabelle, is that it tends to take people 6 to 8 months once they've done the training to even start to look for clients. There's a real transitional time of your own grief and your own thoughts and feelings that needs to take place before you trust yourself. So it's really interesting watching the process.
Mm-hmm.
So there's websites in each country now. If you look up death doula or death midwifery or end of life consultant, we call ourselves, there are training bodies around the place. And I don't think it matters who you train with to start with. Just go and do some early discovery work. You know what a fantastic training first up to is home hospice. Go and do some hospice training or some online counselling training. You know, I love it. We've got a thing called Lifeline. If people have got Lifeline training, it helps them develop some skills of talking to people. But once again, so I've got a website. At the moment, I teach in 4 countries, and my dream would be to come to the States as well, but you do have some people training over there now.
So what countries are you in? I know you mentioned that you've done a lot of training in Cambodia for your own training.
Sure. So I live in Cambodia a lot of the time, and I'm now working on the front line of some military action. I've got thousands of displaced people. So I'm working with dying people between the border of Myanmar and Thailand at the moment. I work in Cambodia. I teach training courses in Bangkok for death doula. I train Singapore, I'm training death doulas, and in Australia, I'm training death doulas. So there's a huge groundswell of this awareness that, you know, we're kind of trying to work on how we're born. We're all doing self-development and looking at the way we live our lives. And as we free our mind, body, and soul, we suddenly go, oh my goodness, I'm still a bit scared of dying. What am I going to do? And this course, even though if you never become a death doula, my dream is that everybody has comfortable language around death. So everybody should go and do a death doula training course purely for their own life enhancement. And we're all going to have family members who die.
Yes. Yes.
And that's what a death doula is, just willing to hold the space for anybody. So training courses, mine's called, who knows what mine's called? I'm Life Options Death Doula. Okay. And I hope to have an online training soon. But yeah, this training courses, just do a Google. They're coming up by the day almost.
Excellent. So if somebody wants to get trained as an end-of-life doula or death doula, there are options they can Google. And if somebody wants to work with you, what's the best way for them to find you?
So I have a website called www.deniselove.net. And that's all about me and the services I provide. And watch that space, because it won't be long before there's an online training course for all of you wonderful people in the States as well.
Right.
But yeah, other than that, there's a website we've just developed called deathdoulasaustralia.com. And that's a site we've put together for the information that we do. And now we're just putting everybody's name up that have trained and are really willing to be of service. So it's really early days, you know, for people to be standing up and saying, rather than just me ringing and saying, do you want to look after somebody, to go, I'm on the internet, I'm ready to do this for life. Yeah. So a lot of people are having career changes, absolutely walking away from high-flying jobs and just going, wow, being of service seems to add to my own happiness as well, you know. So and you can make some money, you know. Just because it's death doesn't mean you can't sell your services beautifully, you know. And I do train men as well, and I love men to train, but this is a professionalization of partly our womanhood and our adulthood, of saying I have skills.
Yeah. So it sounds like if people aren't in Australia or one of the main countries that you train in, they might consider finding, you mentioned end-of-life consultant is something they could Google.
Yeah.
You can also do internet conferencing if somebody is here in the United States and they're interested in working.
Love to do that. Just setting all that up now, just getting there. Excellent. But yeah, it's something that, and because I've been doing it for 40 years, it's not like it's just happened for me. I've been looking after young people. I trained with the Indigenous people in Australia when I was a very young woman, living without doctors or any medical attention. I had to learn from the local people about death. And then working in Cambodia for the last 6 years, there's no hospitals. I'm the only medical help anywhere because I am a nurse as well. But I deal with death of babies, of young children every day. It's a normal part of life, and it's really helped for me to come to understand the normality of death. We live, we die. And then if we can get rid of this westernized grief about, you know, poor me, what am I going to do? And, you know, all the stuff. And then a lot of it's guilt-ridden. A lot of it's because we don't feel well enough connected to people that we feel guilty about. And our grief, you know, is complicated with that. I just feel this passion as an older woman now to get out there and support us all to transition through life really comfortably.
So it sounds like the more people are connected with their loved ones in life, the more peace they have about their passing.
Absolutely. And even if that connection is that you've been an estranged person, if there's a respectfulness around that relationship, if you can come to the point where you go, you know what, my family is no longer who supports me or who I need, but I respect that they exist and they're part of my life. That seems to be very powerful for helping us to not become complicated in our grieving. And for people when they're dying, you don't even have to make peace and tell everybody you love them, but I often sit with people and say, just tell me about your family and, let's let the hurt go, but tell me, we are connected just by blood. We're just connected because we are family, and that respect that goes with that alone is enough.
Yeah, that's so important. And just the whole, business of death, as you say, it can be very spiritual and a very peaceful part of life. And it seems like, the best thing to help people get through is a good connection with their loved ones, a good sense of their own spirituality and beliefs. And if they are in the United States, there are some options to find, maybe work with a death doula over the internet, online, or finding an end-of-life consultant. But you
Well, Google me. Email me. You'll find me. Denise Love is everywhere.
yeah,
Find me and ask me where to train, because I am in touch with people. And, I would just love conversations with anybody from all over the world, and I get them already, to say, you know what, this is a suggestion, that's a suggestion. Open the door and have a conversation with me as well. I'm happy to try and direct them in the right direction.
excellent. Thank you so much, Denise Love. We're going to put a link to your information in the drop-down description for this video. Thank you
Beautiful.
so much for joining us on this special topic, talking about grief and end of life. And again, Denise is an end-of-life death doula. And for more information, you can look her up, or you can Google end-of-life death doulas. And of course, thank you for joining us on We Heart Therapy. If you like what you see, subscribe. More episodes are on the way. Stay tuned.